Welcome to part 3 of Mesoamerican civilizations. Our last empire is the Inca Empire. The height of the Inca Empire really happens between 1438 to 1533 CE, and the Incas are going to incorporate a large portion of Western South America, and it's really going to center here around the Andean Mountains. I think the Incas are probably the coolest civilization out of the 3 that we've talked about, and I have a great quote that kind of explains why I'm so interested in them. So the Incas lacked the use of wheeled vehicles. They lacked animals to ride and draft animals that could pull wagons and plows. They lacked the knowledge of iron and steel. Above all, they lacked a system of writing. Despite these supposed handicaps, the Incas were still able to construct one of the greatest imperials in human history, McEwen Gordon. Basically, what he's talking about is the Inca didn't have any of the resources that these other major civilizations had. The Egyptians, the Indians, the Chinese, they all had, things that made their lives easier. They had wagons and plows, they had horses, camels, things that helped them, writing systems, but the Incans didn't have that, and they were incredibly successful. I think it's just really awesome that they break the mold for so many other civilizations, kind of similar to the Mongols. It's like everybody except for the Incas did this great thing. So moving on here, the Incas are just the last chapter of thousands of years of Andean civilization. So in fact, Andean civilizations are one of the 5 civilizations that scholars deem to be pristine. Basically, they developed complex civilizations without any outside influence. So historians actually estimate that this area was occupied well before 1200 CE. Actually, the Tihuanaca tribe conquered there around 300 CE. And so there's been a pretty consistent empire's worth of people there from 300 to about 1535 CE when the Europeans start to move into this area. The Incas have a very interesting government system. So Incan society is arranged in a very strict hierarchical structure, kind of similarly to other places that we have studied so far. They have nobles and elites at the top, of course, and a middle class of some sort and peasants at the bottom that make up the majority of the population. So the ruling classes actually had interesting things about them. They had a 2-child limit to them. So elite people could only have 2 children, very similar to China's 1-child policy. And the reason they did that is they wanted to keep inheritance and power consolidated so that you wouldn't have 5 brothers that are all trying to claim they're the next Inca ruler. The peasant class, of course, didn't have to abide by this rule because they really want to have as many peasants as possible to help farm and produce these huge architectural works for their people. Their ruler, very similarly to the Aztecs and the Mayans, was also considered their high priest, and he made all of the major decisions for their empire and their religion. And they actually called this person the Sapa. That's kind of what they called their ruler. So under him would be the regular priest, military officer, like officials, and architects. They actually had a whole lot of high value towards architects, mostly because the Inca loved to create these massive architectural statement structures, basically. So fun side note, the Incans were known for creating the most accurate cement block buildings. And their measurements were so precise that they did not need any kind of mortar between the bricks. It just fit so perfectly that the stones all stayed together. So, fun fact. So then the lowest classes of people, of course, makes up pretty much everyone else, probably 95% or so of the population. Farmers are going to make up most of that base. They're a very largely agriculturally based society, and the farmers really support everyone else. An interesting thing here is if they paid taxes, most of them would pay it in gold. And gold is so abundant in the Incan Empire that they mostly used it as a decorative, pieces of art, rather than as a currency of some sort. There's stories of when the conquistadors came to the New World, they found these life-size like animals made out of gold in these Incan rulers' homes. And one example is this life-size llama. I couldn't find a better picture than this one. This is obviously not life-size, but to give you an idea, a llama made out of gold. And the Spanish just took them, robbed them of their decorative gold animal pieces, brought them all back to Spain, and then they melted them down into gold bars, which I think is just kind of the worst tragedy of all. You have this awesome llama art and you turn it into gold bars. Very sad. Like I mentioned earlier, the Inca did not have a standardized currency system. They mostly used a barter system as they traded throughout the empire and with their neighbors. The Inca were also ingenious in that they manipulated the supply of resources, never letting too much into the marketplace, so their neighbors always needed a steady supply of their goods. This is a great term to star in your notes. The Inca are going to value corvée labor over taxes in many situations for peasants. So corvée labor is labor extracted by a local authority for little or no pay, or instead of taxes, and used especially for the maintenance of roads. So basically, instead of having their peasants pay taxes and money, they had them pay in their labor. So the Incas are known for their large public works and massive road networks, and they need people to sacrifice time and also not be paid in order to do this. Peasants would often work in 90-day shifts to pay off their labor tax for the year. The Incans are going to change their environment to fit their agricultural needs. Some of the examples of this would be things like drainage systems that they create and canals to help expand their crop resources. They're also really known for their terrace farming as well up the sides of mountains. Some of the crops they're going to produce are things like potatoes, tomatoes, peanuts, cacao. Those are going to be the main products they're going to grow and trade throughout the empire. The Incas lived in a very abundant society. The Andean region is actually a pretty stable climate. They were able to produce large amounts of food and resources, enough for everybody. There's very rarely any examples of any kind of famine or anything where the food level drops below a certain point. It's a very stable place to live, and the Incas are going to have an extremely large population for this time period because of that. The Incas' diet is also extremely healthy and nourishing. Plus, the high altitude of the Andean mountains increased their lung capacity and overall heart function. Because they had no other way of traveling other than walking, they also got plenty of exercise. The average lifespan for an Incan before Europeans came was around 70 years of age, while for Europeans during this same time period in history, the average lifespan was only 45 years of age. The Incas are also very well known for their incredible system of roads. They have one road that ran almost the entire length of the South American Pacific coast. And one really awesome thing about it too, when you think about it, is that they had no metal tools to help build this. They had no animals to help bring supplies. They made this all with just their hands. And it's an incredible feat to think about. Another really cool invention of the Incas is quipa knots. So quipa translates to talking knots, which are how the Incans were able to keep records. Usually these things would be records like taxes, property, transactions, and census records, but each of these knots means specific things, the style of knot, how many are on each string, and that's how they kept track of like numeral records. The downfall of the Inca Empire really comes mostly because of the Europeans that come and try and take over the Inca. They are able to do that through, of course, like the guns, germs, and steel ideas, but also because they were able to recruit most of the Inca's neighbors to turn against them. The Inca were very unpopular with their neighbors because they kept taking them over and charging a lot of money for all of the goods that they kept making them buy. So, because of these things, the Inca eventually fall. Well, congratulations! You made it to the very end of our first 3-part series about Mesoamerica. If you have any questions, feel free to shoot me an email or ask me in class.